I was mocked when my wife branded my 5 years marriage romance pathetic. I cut off gestures, exposed our one-sided marriage, and walked away for good. Your wife's favorite meal, set up candles around the dining room, and even dig out that playlist from your first date. All for your 5th wedding anniversary. You're feeling pretty good about yourself, right? Well, let me tell you what happened when she walked through that door with her sister and best friend trailing behind her. She took one look at the setup, rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might fall out, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Stop trying to be romantic. It's pathetic. You look desperate." Then she turned to her friends and added, "This is exactly what I was telling you about. He does this needy stuff constantly." The room went dead silent. Her sister looked uncomfortable. Her best friend just stared at the floor. And me? I stood there holding a bottle of wine like an idiot, watching my wife destroy 5 years of marriage with one sentence. But here's the thing that really got to me. It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said them, like she'd been holding back this opinion for years and finally found the perfect audience to share it with, like every romantic gesture I'd ever made was some kind of joke she'd been tolerating. I set the wine down, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "You know what? You're absolutely right." The confusion on her face was priceless. She expected me to apologize, to scramble, to explain myself. Instead, I started blowing out the candles one by one. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice losing some of that confident edge. "Stopping," I replied, gathering up the flowers I'd bought. "You just taught me something valuable. Romance is pathetic when it's one-sided. So, I'm done being pathetic." Her friends exchanged glances. This wasn't going according to whatever script she had in her head. She probably expected me to sulk in the bedroom or beg for forgiveness later, but I just walked past all 3 of them, tossed the flowers in the trash, and ordered pizza instead. "We can eat like roommates from now on," I said, pulling out my phone. "Pepperoni or cheese?" That night, she tried to talk to me about overreacting and how she was just having a bad day, classic damage control. But something had shifted in me during those 30 seconds of public humiliation. I realized I'd been performing in a one-man show for an audience that wasn't even watching. So I told her, "I heard you perfectly the first time. Message received. No more romantic gestures. No more pathetic behavior. You want practical? You've got it." She laughed it off, thinking I was being dramatic. "Fine," she said. "Maybe we both need to be more realistic about what marriage actually is." Those words would come back to haunt her sooner than she thought. The next morning, I didn't bring her coffee in bed like I had every weekend for 5 years. When she came downstairs expecting her usual cup, I was already finishing mine. "Coffee's in the kitchen," I said without looking up from my newspaper. She stared at me for a moment, waiting for me to jump up and serve her. When I didn't move, she huffed and made her own coffee. I could feel her watching me, trying to figure out if this was some kind of punishment or game. It wasn't. It was clarity. For the first time in years, I saw our marriage for what it really was. I was the one planning date nights that she'd complain about. I was the one remembering anniversaries while she forgot. I was the one trying to keep romance alive in a relationship where only one person was actually participating. That afternoon, she tried to test my resolve. She mentioned how her co-worker's husband had surprised her with concert tickets, clearly fishing for me to do something similar. Instead of taking the bait, I just nodded and said, "That's nice for her." The look on her face was fascinating, like she just realized her favorite puppet had cut its own strings. By Sunday night, she was getting antsy. No flowers, no surprise dinner plans, no romantic movie suggestions, just me reading my book, completely content in my own space. "Are you going to stay mad forever?" she finally asked. "I'm not mad," I replied, and I meant it. "I'm just not pathetic anymore. Big difference." That's when I saw the first crack in her confidence. She'd gotten so comfortable with me chasing her that she'd forgotten what it felt like when I wasn't. The first week of my new approach was like watching a science experiment unfold. She actually seemed relieved at first. No more surprise lunches at her office. No more random flowers showing up. No more texts asking how her day was going. She got exactly what she asked for, and initially, she was thriving. I watched her tell her mother over the phone, "He's finally growing up and giving me some space. It's so much better this way." She said it loud enough for me to hear, probably expecting some kind of reaction. I just kept folding laundry like she was discussing the weather. But here's what she didn't anticipate. When I stopped being romantic, I didn't just stop with the flowers and fancy dinners. I stopped with everything that wasn't absolutely necessary. No more good morning kisses. No more asking about her plans for the weekend. No more caring if she got home late or where she'd been. She was getting the full package of what she'd requested, and by day 10 the cracks started showing. "Are you going to ask me about my presentation today?" she said one morning, clearly fishing. "Do you want to tell me about it?" I replied, not looking up from my coffee. "Well, it went well," she said, waiting for follow-up questions that never came. "Good for you," I said, and went back to checking my phone. The silence that followed was beautiful. She stood there for a full minute, probably waiting for me to engage, to show interest, to be the attentive husband she'd been taking for granted. When it became clear I wasn't going to play that role anymore, she grabbed her purse and left for work without another word. That evening, she tried a different tactic. She cooked dinner, which was unusual since I'd been handling most of the cooking for years. It was nothing special, just pasta and store-bought sauce. But she presented it like she just solved world hunger. "I made dinner," she announced, clearly expecting praise. "Thanks," I said, serving myself and sitting down. No compliments, no appreciation speech, just acknowledgement. She sat across from me, watching me eat with this expectant look on her face. When the praise never came, she started talking about her day, rambling about office drama and weekend plans. I listened politely, nodded at appropriate moments, but offered nothing beyond basic responses. "You're being weird," she finally said. "How so?" "You're just different, distant." I put my fork down and looked at her directly. "I'm being exactly what you asked for. Not pathetic, not trying too hard, just existing in the same space as you." She didn't like that answer. I could see her brain working, trying to figure out how to get back to the dynamic where I was constantly seeking her approval. But I was done playing that game. The weekend was when things got really interesting. Saturday morning, she announced she was going shopping with her friends. In the old days, I would have asked where, when she'd be back, maybe even offered to pick her up. This time, I just said, "Have fun." She lingered by the door, clearly expecting more engagement. When it didn't come, she tried again. "I might be late." "Okay. Like really late." "Understood." She left frustrated, and I spent the day doing exactly what I wanted. Fixed that leaky faucet I'd been putting off, organized my tools, read a book without interruption. It was the most peaceful Saturday I'd had in months. When she came home that evening, loaded down with shopping bags, she seemed almost disappointed that I hadn't missed her. She started showing me everything she'd bought, clearly hoping for my usual interested responses. Instead, I glanced at each item and gave neutral acknowledgments. "That's nice. Good find. Looks fine." By the third outfit, she was getting agitated. "You're not even looking properly." "I'm looking. It's a dress. It's blue." "What else would you like me to say?" "I don't know. Maybe show some interest in your wife." That's when I hit her with a line that changed everything. "I showed interest for 5 years. You called it pathetic. So now you get this interest. Congratulations." The shopping bags hit the floor. She stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. This wasn't the husband she knew. This wasn't the man who used to hang on her every word and celebrate every small thing she did. I was having a bad day when I said that, she tried. "Maybe. But you said it in front of an audience, which means you'd been thinking it for a while. Bad days don't create new opinions. They just make us honest about the ones we already have." She had no comeback for that. For the first time in our marriage, I'd left her speechless. That night, she tried to initiate physical intimacy, probably thinking it would reset our dynamic. But even there, I maintained my new boundaries. No passionate romance, no emotional connection, just mechanical participation. She got what she technically asked for, but it clearly wasn't what she actually wanted. Afterward, lying in the dark, she asked, "What happened to us?" "You got your wish," I replied. "No more pathetic romantic gestures, no more desperate attempts to make you happy. Just two people sharing living expenses." 3 weeks into my new lifestyle, she was completely losing her mind. The woman who had confidently declared my romantic efforts pathetic was now desperately trying to get any kind of emotional reaction from me. It was like watching someone realize they'd thrown away a winning lottery ticket. She started with small tests, mentioning how her male coworker had complimented her outfit, talking about how her ex had reached out on social media, even bringing up how her friend's husband was so attentive compared to other men. Each comment was a fishing expedition, waiting for me to show jealousy, concern, or any sign that I still cared enough to fight for her. My response was the same every time. "That's interesting." Then I'd go back to whatever I was doing. The lack of reaction was driving her crazy. She'd gotten so used to my emotional investment that my indifference felt like living with a stranger, which in many ways I was becoming. I'd started hitting the gym again not for her, but because I finally had time for myself. I was reading books I'd wanted to read for years. I'd even started learning guitar, something she'd always dismissed as a waste of time. Funny how much you can accomplish when you're not constantly trying to please someone who doesn't want to be pleased. One evening, she tried a more direct approach. She dressed up in lingerie and posed in the bedroom doorway like something out of a movie. In the old days, I would have dropped everything and showered her with compliments. This time, I glanced up from my book and said, "Going somewhere special?" The confusion on her face was priceless. I thought we could spend some time together. We spend time together every day. We live in the same house. I mean, together. I closed my book and looked at her properly. If you want to have relations, just say so. We don't need costumes and performances anymore. Those were part of the romantic gestures you found pathetic. She deflated like a punctured balloon. This wasn't the script she'd written in her head. She wanted the old me, the one who would have swept her off her feet and made her feel desired. Instead, she got practical honesty. "You used to make me feel special," she said, her voice smaller than usual. "I used to try. You taught me it was pathetic. So, I stopped." She sat on the edge of the bed, finally starting to understand what she'd lost. "I didn't mean you should stop everything. You didn't specify what parts of being pathetic I should keep and which parts I should drop. So, I made an executive decision and dropped it all." That weekend, she invited her sister over, probably hoping for backup in whatever intervention she was planning. I could hear them talking in the kitchen while I worked on a home improvement project I'd been putting off for months. "He's just so cold now," she was saying, "like he doesn't care about anything." "Maybe he's finally listening to what you've been saying for years," her sister replied. I'd always liked her sister. She had a habit of cutting through nonsense. "I didn't want this," my wife continued. "What did you want? You complained constantly about how he was too needy, too romantic, too attentive. Now he's giving you space and you're upset about that, too." There was a long pause before my wife said I wanted him to care but not be so obvious about it. I almost laughed out loud. She wanted me to care secretly, to pine for her from a distance while pretending I didn't need her. She wanted the emotional security of being loved without having to acknowledge or reciprocate that love. It was the most selfish relationship dynamic I'd ever heard described. Her sister must have felt the same way because her response was brutal. "You can't have it both ways. Either you want a husband who loves you openly, or you want a roommate who pays half the bills. You can't have both in the same person." Later that evening, she tried a new tactic. She suggested we go out for dinner like we used to. I agreed, but not for the reason she hoped. I was hungry and I didn't feel like cooking. At the restaurant, she tried to recreate our old dynamic, flirting, touching my hand across the table, asking about my day with exaggerated interest. It felt like watching someone perform a play they'd forgotten the lines to. "Remember our second date here?" she asked, looking around the restaurant with manufactured nostalgia. "Vaguely," I replied, cutting my steak. "You were so nervous. You spilled wine on your shirt." "Sounds right." She waited for me to add to the memory, to share in the romantic recollection. When I didn't, she tried harder. "You said you'd never been so nervous around a woman before." Probably true at the time. The conversation died there. She couldn't understand why her attempts at connection were falling flat. What she didn't realize was that she trained me out of emotional vulnerability. I'd learned that sharing feelings made me pathetic, so I'd stopped sharing them. On the drive home, she finally lost her composure. "I feel like I'm married to a robot." "Robots are efficient," I replied. "No unnecessary emotions, no pathetic romantic gestures, just function and purpose." "That's not what I wanted." "Then you should have been more specific about what you did want, because all I heard was what you didn't want. And I've given you exactly that." She was quiet for the rest of the drive, probably realizing for the first time that getting what you asked for isn't always getting what you want. 1 month in, she finally cracked. It happened on a Thursday evening when I came home from the gym. She was sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread everywhere, clearly waiting for me. This wasn't casual. This was an ambush. "We need to talk," she said before I'd even set my gym bag down. "About what?" "About this. Whatever this is that you're doing." I grabbed a water bottle from the fridge and leaned against the counter. "I'm not doing anything. I'm just existing, same as you. No, you're punishing me. You're being vindictive and petty because your feelings got hurt." That's when I knew we were about to have the conversation that would define everything. She'd finally dropped the pretense and shown me who she really was underneath all the manipulation. My feelings got hurt, I repeated slowly. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You humiliated me in front of your friends, called 5 years of romantic gestures pathetic. And now that I've stopped doing those things, I'm the one being petty. You're taking it too far. I'm taking what too far? Not buying you flowers, not planning surprise dates, not telling you how beautiful you look every morning. Which part of stopping the pathetic behavior is too far? She stood up, her voice getting louder. You know exactly what you're doing. You're withholding affection to manipulate me. Withholding affection? I almost laughed. I'm not withholding anything. I'm just not giving you something you never valued in the first place. You can't withdraw money from an account you already closed. That's not what I meant when I said those things. Then what did you mean? Because I've been trying to figure that out for weeks. She started pacing, and I could see the real her emerging. The mask was slipping, and what was underneath wasn't pretty. I meant you were being too much, too intense, too needy. Like you couldn't exist without my approval. And now I exist just fine without your approval. Problem solved. But now you don't care about anything I do. There it was. The truth she'd been dancing around for a month. She didn't want me to stop caring. She wanted me to care silently, desperately, without bothering her with the evidence of that caring. You're right, I said calmly. I don't care what you do because caring about someone who thinks caring is pathetic is exhausting. I never said caring was pathetic. You said my romantic gestures were pathetic. Those gestures were how I showed I cared. So, by extension, yes, you did call my caring pathetic. She was getting frantic now, realizing that her words had consequences she hadn't anticipated. You're twisting everything I said. I'm applying everything you said. There's a difference. Fine. She exploded. You want the truth? Sometimes your romantic stuff made me feel suffocated, like you needed constant validation that I loved you back. It felt desperate. Now we were getting somewhere. The real conversation was finally happening. So you felt suffocated by being loved? I said. That's your complaint. I felt suffocated by being needed so much. There's a difference. Not really. Love without need is just friendship with benefits. But I understand now. You wanted to be wanted, not needed. You wanted to feel special, without having to make me feel special in return. Her face went red. That's not fair, is it? When's the last time you did something romantic for me? When's the last time you surprised me with anything? When's the last time you made me feel like I was more than just a roommate who pays half the bills? The silence that followed was deafening. She couldn't answer because we both knew the answer was never. I'd been the only one investing in the romantic side of our marriage for years. I show love differently, she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. How? By accepting everything I do for you without reciprocation. By criticizing the way I express love while offering nothing in return. I do things for you. Like what? Another silence. She was scrambling, trying to come up with examples that didn't exist. I cook sometimes. I clean. I manage the household. Those are adult responsibilities, not expressions of love. Roommates do those things. She sat back down, deflated. For the first time in our marriage, she was forced to confront the reality of what she'd brought to the relationship versus what she'd taken from it. So what now? She asked, her voice smaller than before. You're just going to stay like this forever, cold and distant? I'm not cold, I replied. I'm just not pathetic anymore. If you want warmth, you'll have to earn it the same way I had to earn your respect for 5 years. Except I actually succeeded in earning your respect by stopping, while you never succeeded in earning mine by taking. That's cruel. It's honest. You wanted honesty, right? No more desperate romantic gestures clouding the truth of what this marriage actually is. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. The man who used to beg for her attention was gone, replaced by someone who didn't need her validation to feel whole. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. That's the first honest thing you've said in weeks, I replied. But here's the thing about fixing something. First, you have to admit it's broken. Then you have to figure out what broke it. We're still working on step 1. After that explosive confrontation, she spent 3 days walking around the house like a ghost. No more attempts at conversation, no more fishing for reactions. She'd finally understood that the man she'd been married to for 5 years had fundamentally changed, and she wasn't sure how to handle this new version. I gave her space to process everything we discussed. Meanwhile, I continued living my life exactly as I had been, Gym in the mornings, work, home to my hobbies and books. I was more content than I'd been in years, and that contentment wasn't dependent on her mood or approval. On Sunday evening, she finally approached me. I was in the garage working on refinishing an old dresser I'd picked up at a yard sale. She stood in the doorway watching me sand the wood for several minutes before speaking. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began carefully. "I didn't stop working. And you're right about some things. I haven't been reciprocating the way I should have." "Okay." She waited for me to engage more enthusiastically with her admission, but I just kept sanding. The old me would have jumped at this opening, would have seen it as progress worth celebrating. The new me recognized it for what it was: damage control. "I want to try to fix this," she continued when it became clear I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I finally stopped working and looked at her directly. "What exactly do you want to fix? Our marriage? The way things have become, between us?" "The way things have become," I repeated. "You mean the way things actually are now that I'm not performing romance for an audience of one?" She flinched but pressed on. "I know I haven't been the best wife. I know I took you for granted. You're getting warmer. But you've changed too. You're not the man I married." That's when I put down the sandpaper entirely and gave her my full attention. "You're absolutely right. The man you married was desperate for your approval. He would have accepted breadcrumbs of affection and called it a feast. He would have apologized for being humiliated just to keep the peace." I stood up and faced her completely. "That man is gone. He died the night you called him pathetic in front of your friends. What you're looking at now is what grew from his ashes." "I don't like this version," she said quietly. "I don't care," I replied. "This version likes himself. This version doesn't need your validation to feel valuable. This version knows the difference between love and desperation." She was crying now, which in the past would have triggered my protective instincts. Now it just felt like another manipulation tactic. "So what do you want from me?" she asked through tears. "Nothing," I said simply. "That's what you never understood. I don't want anything from you anymore. I don't need you to validate my romantic gestures because I'm not making any. I don't need you to appreciate my efforts because I'm not making extra efforts for you. Then why are we still married?" It was a fair question, and I'd been asking myself the same thing for weeks. Good question. We're married because neither of us has filed for divorce yet. We're married because we split expenses and it's convenient. We're married because, legally, we haven't undone what we did 5 years ago. But are we actually married in any meaningful sense? No. She sobbed harder. "I don't want to get divorced." "Then here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You have one chance to prove that you want to be married to me and not just married to the idea of having a husband." She looked up hopefully. "What do you need me to do?" "Stop trying to get the old me back. That man is dead and he's not coming back. If you want to be married to the man standing in front of you, then you need to earn his respect the same way he spent 5 years failing to earn yours." "How?" "Figure it out. I spent half a decade trying to show you love in ways that made sense to me. Now it's your turn. But understand this, I'm not going to give you hints. I'm not going to coach you through it. I'm not going to pretend small gestures are bigger than they are." I picked up the sandpaper again. "You have until the end of the month to decide if you want to put actual effort into this marriage, or if you want to file for divorce. But I'm done living in this limbo where we're married on paper but strangers in practice. And if I choose to try, then you better succeed because I won't give you a third chance to figure out how to love someone properly. The pathetic romantic husband who would have forgiven anything is gone. This version has standards." She wiped her eyes and asked, "What if I can't? What if I don't know how?" "Then we'll both know where we stand, and we can proceed accordingly." She stood there for another minute, probably hoping I'd soften the ultimatum or give her more specific guidance. When it became clear that wasn't happening, she turned to leave. "One more thing," I called after her. She turned back hopefully. "Don't think you can manipulate your way through this with tears or drama, or by trying to make me feel guilty. I'm immune to all of that now. The only thing that will work is genuine effort and genuine change. Nothing else will even register." She nodded and walked away, leaving me alone with my project and my thoughts. For the first time in our marriage, the ball was entirely in her court. And for the first time in my life, I was completely okay with whatever she decided to do with it. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for her to make her choice. And honestly, I was impressed she lasted that long. I'd expected either immediate capitulation or immediate abandonment. Instead, she tried something I hadn't anticipated: actual effort. It started small. coffee waiting for me in the morning without being asked, my favorite meal prepared when I came home from work. She even attempted to show interest in the guitar I'd been learning, asking me to play something for her. But here's what she couldn't grasp. These weren't romantic gestures. They were transactions. She was trying to purchase my old behavior with new actions. The difference was obvious to me even if it wasn't to her. When I used to bring her coffee in bed, it came from a place of genuine desire to make her morning better. When she made me coffee, it came from a place of trying to reset our dynamic back to where she was comfortable. "I've been trying," she said one evening after I'd thanked her politely for dinner but hadn't reacted with the enthusiasm she was clearly expecting. "I've noticed," I replied. "But you don't seem different." "Different how? Like you don't care that I'm making an effort." I set down my fork and looked at her. "I appreciate the effort, but effort to get something isn't the same as effort to give something. You're still operating from a place of what you want to receive, not what you want to give." She didn't understand, and frankly, I didn't expect her to. The woman who had spent 5 years taking genuine love for granted wasn't going to suddenly understand the difference between authentic affection and strategic behavior. But I gave her credit for trying longer than I'd expected. 2 more weeks of increasingly desperate attempts to crack my new armor. She bought me things I didn't need. She suggested activities I hadn't expressed interest in. She even attempted physical affection that felt more like a negotiation than intimacy. The breaking point came when she tried to recreate our first date. She made reservations at the same restaurant, wore a similar dress, even ordered the same wine. It was like watching someone try to perform archaeology on a relationship that had already been buried. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" she asked over dessert, clearly hoping to trigger some nostalgic breakthrough. "Vaguely. You said you'd never met anyone who made you want to be a better man." "Sounds like something I would have said back then." "Did you mean it?" I considered the question seriously. At the time, yes. But I was wrong about what being a better man meant. "What do you mean?" "I thought being a better man meant being the man you wanted me to be. Turns out being a better man means being a man I can respect. Those aren't the same thing." She was quiet for the rest of dinner. I could see her processing the reality that her month of effort hadn't moved me an inch closer to the man she'd married. If anything, my resolve had only strengthened. That night, she made her final play. She sat me down and delivered what was clearly a prepared speech about love, growth, and second chances. She talked about how much she'd learned, how much she'd changed, how much she wanted to make our marriage work. When she finished, she looked at me expectantly, probably waiting for me to be moved by her words. Instead, I asked a simple question. "If I went back to bringing you flowers every week, would you call them pathetic again?" She hesitated just long enough to give me my answer. "That's what I thought," I said. "I wouldn't," she insisted. But we both knew she was lying. "Yes, you would. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. Because fundamentally, you don't respect expressions of love that come too easily or too often. You've proven that." The next morning, I found divorce papers on the kitchen table. She'd made her choice, and to her credit, she'd made it cleanly. No drama, no last-ditch emotional manipulation. Just a quiet acknowledgement that she couldn't live with the man I'd become, and I wouldn't go back to being the man I'd been. "I can't do this," she said when I found her packing. "I can't be married to someone who doesn't love me." "I never said I didn't love you," I replied. "You don't act like you love me. I don't act desperate for your approval. There's a difference." She stopped packing and looked at me. "What's the point of love without romance? What's the point of romance without respect?" She had no answer for that, and we both knew why. 6 months later, I was sitting in my own place, which I bought without needing anyone's approval or input. The guitar was getting better, the gym routine was solid, the book collection was growing. I'd started dating again, but this time with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. My ex-wife texted me once, 3 months after the divorce was finalized. She said she'd been thinking about our conversation regarding romance and respect, and she finally understood what I'd meant. She said she was sorry. I texted back, "I hope you find someone who can give you what you're looking for." What I didn't say was that I hoped she'd learn to give back what she was looking for. But that wasn't my problem anymore. The funny thing about stopping pathetic behavior is that it doesn't just change how others see you. It changes how you see yourself. I'd spent 5 years trying to be worthy of someone who didn't think I was worth the effort. Now I knew my worth, and I wasn't willing to negotiate it downward for anyone. The man who used to beg for love was gone. In his place was someone who knew the difference between being loved and being tolerated, and that man would never settle for tolerance again.